Hey y'all, howdy. Welcome to One for the Books. I'm Sandra Broadwell. So today I'm going to give you guys a one sentence plot teaser and one quote from every book that I read in quarter two, which was April, May, and June. I read 22 books total during these 3 months. And I have pretty much an identical video that I did for quarter one, which was January, February, and March. So if you're interested in that, I will link it in the description below. As I'm going through these books, I'll also be sure to mention which book was my favorite book of each month as we go through. The very first book that I read in April was In My Dreams I Hold a Knife by Ashley Winstead. This is a mystery thriller in which a group of friends who are all sort of despicable people go back for their 10-year college reunion and try to uncover who murdered their friend 10 years ago. It turns out the real you is a quilt made up of the light and the dark. The life you've lived in sunshine and your shadow life, stretching underneath the surface of your mind like a deep underwater world, exerting invisible power. You are a living, breathing story made up of the moments in time you cherish, all strung together, and those you hide, the moments that seem lost. Next up, I read Best Served Cold by Joe Abercrombie, which was my favorite book in the month of April. This is a part of the First Law World, a standalone book following the first trilogy. And this is a grimdark fantasy in which a woman and her brother are wronged by a group of people they trusted and seek revenge on the 7 men who betrayed them. The boundaries of civilization are not the impregnable walls civilized men take them for. As easily as smoke on the wind, they can dissolve. Next up, I read The Slow Regard of Silent Things by Patrick Rothfuss. This is a short story within the Kingkiller Chronicles, and it is following Ari, who is the girl who lives beneath the university. I didn't pull out any quotes from this. The writing of this book didn't really appeal to me the same way that the writing of the novels did. Next up, I read Save the Cat Writes a Novel by Jessica Brody. This is a nonfiction book that is about writing craft and basically breaks down stories from popular culture to talk about story structure and how it works. I also didn't have a quote from this one, but that's just because it was more of a how-to book. Then I read Lexicon by Max Berry. This is a science fiction thriller in which there is basically like a secret language that unlocks the human brain, and for the people who learn this language, they can use it to manipulate others. Within perfect walls, there is nothing worth protecting. Then I read Letters to a Young Poet by Rainier Maria Rilke. This was a famous poet back in the early 1900s, and this book is a collection of real letters that he wrote to an aspiring poet to encourage him to pursue writing in creative outlets, and it's a very philosophical book. Works of art are infinitely solitary, and nothing is less likely to reach them than criticism. Only love can grasp them and hold them and do them justice. Then I read Bright Dead Things by Ada Limon, which is a beautiful collection of poetry by the National Poet Laureate of the United States. Isn't it funny how the cold numbs everything but grief? If we could light up the room with pain, we'd be such a glorious fire. Then I read The Three-Body Problem by Cixin Liu, which is the first book of a science fiction trilogy about an alien invasion approaching Earth and the repercussions of that on human society. Is it possible that the relationship between humanity and evil is similar to the relationship between the ocean and an iceberg floating on its surface? Both the ocean and the iceberg are made of the same material. That the iceberg seems separate is only because it is in a different form. In reality, it is but a part of the vast ocean. Next up, I read Know My Name by Chanel Miller, and this is a memoir written by the Emily Doe, Jane Doe victim in the Brock Turner rape trial, and it's a very powerful story. When I was little, I never asked anyone if I was an artist. I just cleared enough space on the table to make room for my paper. Then I read The Jasmine Throne by Tasha Suri. This is a fantasy novel that has 2 different point of view characters. One is the sister of the emperor who is imprisoned for not sacrificing herself for their religion, and the other is a maidservant who is in possession of some forbidden magic. She knew how to lie, of course. She did so often, but the value of a truth carefully carved to meet the needs of her audience, was much greater and far more difficult to disprove. Then I read Stories of Your Life and Others by Ted Chiang. This is a collection of science fiction short stories that will make you think and leave you wanting more. Stories of Your Life and Others was my favorite book of May, but that was a really close call. For the first time, he knew night for what it was, the shadow of the earth itself, cast against the sky. After that, I read The Traveling Cat Chronicles by Hiro Arikawa. This is a short contemporary novel about a cat that goes on a road trip with its owner, and the owner is trying to find a new home for it. It's mostly told from the cat's perspective. If you have to consider what's going to happen after you die, life becomes doubly troublesome. Next up, I read Blue Skinned Gods by S.J. Sindhu. This is a contemporary novel about a young boy born with blue skin in India who is raised to believe that he is a reincarnation of a Hindu god. I was so used to being watched by him that the absence of his gaze scorched my skin. Next up, I read The Dark Forest by Cixin Liu, which is the second book in the sci-fi trilogy about an alien invasion, and this one dives into the lengths that humanity will go to in order to preserve itself. A soldier who's only willing to engage in a winnable war is unqualified to be one. Then I read Yellowface by R.F. Kuang, which is a contemporary novel about a white woman who steals a manuscript from an Asian author. It is a story about Asian history, and she publishes it as her own in an ethnically ambiguous way. Awards don't matter. At least I am told this constantly by the people who regularly win them. Then I read She Who Became the Sun by Shelley Parker Chan. This is a fantasy novel where a young girl pretends to be a boy in order to receive a fate of greatness, and kind of the war and politics that she gets wrapped up in by doing so. In a warrior culture that looked down upon scholars, a scholar naturally took pleasure in seeing defeated warriors coming home in disgrace. Then I read Our Missing Hearts by Celeste Ng. This is a dystopian novel about a young boy that goes searching for his missing mother. Maybe sometimes the nail that stuck up pierced the foot that stomped down. I kicked off June with The Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller. This is a retelling of the Iliad from the perspective of a character named Patroclus, who was Achilles' childhood friend and lover. You can use a spear as a walking stick, but that will not change its nature. Then I read The Traitor Baru Cormorant by Seth Dickinson. This is the first book in a political fantasy in which a young girl's home country is destroyed by the evil empire, and she dedicates her life to infiltrating the empire and taking it down from the inside. Where civilization had purged the wolf, the coyote still flourished. Then I read Death's End by Cixin Liu, which is the final book in the sci-fi trilogy about the alien invasion. And this book goes into the fate of both the alien and human species over the course of millennia. In the universe, every part of space flowed, churned, trembled between madness and horror like fiery flames that emitted only frost. The sun and the planets and all substance and existence seem to be only hallucinations produced by the turbulence of space-time. My second to last book is Southernmost by Silas House. This is a contemporary novel about a Southern pastor who stands up for a gay couple, and because of that is outcast from his community and his family. And it's his attempt to reckon between faith and bigotry and try and be a good father throughout it all. I didn't have any quotes from this book because I listened to it on audiobook, unfortunately, and didn't have time to really stop and linger over any of the quotes, but it was a very good book and beautifully written. My last book for the month of June, which was possibly my favorite. This was another really tough one, even though I only read 5 books in June. But I'm going to say This Is How You Lose the Time War by Amal El-Motar and Max Gladstone. This is a short science fiction novel about 2 women on opposite sides of a war, and they begin to leave letters for each other in the ashes of their battlegrounds. Killing gets easier with practice, and mechanics and technique. Having killed never does. So that's all the books that I read in quarter 2, and a little sneak peek at what it's like inside these books and what they're about. I hope you really enjoyed this. Please be sure to comment if you've read any of these books, or maybe tell me what your favorite quote was in the video. Thanks for watching. As always, be kind, read books, and hit the subscribe button below for more bookish content to come. I'll see you next time.